Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this RedGamingTech.com video we're going to be discussing as well as analysing tech news which as usual has popped up in the past 24 or so hours. Hopefully you're having an amazing day. We've got a lot of stuff to get through in today's video, so let's just begin with AMD and yet another small update from myself regarding the performance targets of RDNA 2 from the company. As you're doubtlessly aware at this point, AMD did preview an RDNA 2 class GPU at their recent event, but that event of course did focus primarily on Ryzen 5000. It's going to be just under now 2 weeks until AMD do formally confirm the performance and pricing, at least hopefully we get all of that information, of RDNA 2. But if you've been following the channel for any length of time, you'll know that I've had several exclusives now where I've revealed what I'm hearing about the GPU, and that is that it's very competitive with Ampere. In the performance preview, we saw a GPU which was a little slower to spitting distance with the RTX 3080. Unfortunately, we do not know full testing conditions of the AMD GPU, and it makes it even harder because we don't have access to the same CPU which was being used in the tests by AMD, which means apples to apples comparisons are at best tricky. We also are missing other definitive characteristics of the testing. For example, what are the state of the drivers at this point? Is there still optimizations left to do? An AMD employee, Scott Herkelman, did say that they are still optimizing, but long story short, we can say that it is within the ballpark. But I've been hearing from another one of my sources, and they've been doing some digging, and it does seem like indeed there are at least 1 to 2 more SKUs than what has been shown off here, and I was told that the Halo product, I'm going to refer to it as the 6900 XT, but it could be called, Chicken Coop for all we know. Names can change until the last minute, but I was told that that product is going to be roughly on par with the RTX 3090, but it does depend upon the title. In fact, I was told in some applications AMD appear to be ahead of Nvidia, but in others Nvidia seem to claw back the lead. But at this point, I think it's pretty safe to say that AMD are behind Nvidia in ray tracing performance. I've heard this now from so many people. I would be absolutely shocked if it is not the case. So I believe that this is very accurate, and I think also this makes a lot of sense for AMD's approach with RDNA 2 with the Infinity Cache, which I've gone over several times over at this point, but I've obviously leaked a lot of those details, but it's a drastically improved caching system on the GPU with up to 128 megabytes of cache, I was told, for the top-end products. And long story short, this is so that they can have a much narrower memory bus, and they don't need to use such an expensive memory configuration compared to what they would have if this was not in place. And given we're hearing about a resurgence in the Project Quantum that AMD were working on back in 2015, perhaps this does make sense. If you're unfamiliar with Project Quantum, AMD actually did create a really cool, at least in my opinion, I think it looks cool, looking kind of mini PC. And back then, it was actually designed around an Intel CPU because AMD were still not obviously having Zen available in 2015, along with a Fiji-based GPU. Fiji had flaws, definitely, and at the time, most people would have preferred to go with the Nvidia option. However, that really wasn't the thing that scuppered the project. Basically, people knew at that point that combined with the 900 series from Nvidia doing absolutely phenomenally, obviously cards like the 970 and 980 were incredibly popular with gamers, but combine that with them needing to outsource to Intel to provide the CPU, and quite frankly, limited ability to manufacture stuff at that point because, well, obviously their finances were not exactly, well, secure. The project pretty much got shelved, but now we've seen kind of hints that the project is actually alive and well with a new patent filing. Of course, a patent is just a patent, it doesn't necessarily become a product, but all of this stuff together does kind of paint a picture of where AMD may be going with this. If you recall back to one of my earlier PlayStation videos, I did say that one of the benefits of RDNA 2, in terms of ray tracing anyway, was that it was very scalable. In fact, I was told this about the entire RDNA 2 architecture. So I would imagine that one of the reasons that Infinity Cache is being used by AMD is that it's absolutely fantastic for APUs and cheaper to produce GPUs, even if they are discrete. And you can imagine some really interesting usage cases for low power devices utilizing this type of architecture with RDNA 2, because it means that you could get away with a quite meager memory configuration in terms of the amount of bandwidth for a decent level of performance. After all, 448 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth is apparently what we see with the highest end card, that is, assuming the information I have is correct, at 256-bit at 14 Gbps. So you can imagine that a GPU, even at 128 gigabytes per second or something like that, could be reasonably configured to put out quite a lot of oomph on a small die. So there's a ton of different options that AMD have with this architecture. So I do suspect that there is quite a lot which is underlying AMD's decision here. If you have any experience at all with the Ryzen platform, you'll know that memory clock frequencies are very important, and this was definitely the case for Ryzen 3000. But Ryzen 5000 is absolutely no different. There are three clocks, the first being Infinity Fabric, FCLK. This governs how quickly the CPU can communicate across different CPU dies, and also with SOC controllers, PCIe, SATA, and so on. There's the memory controller clock, which governs how quickly the memory controller can ingest and digest memory. So there's this slide which was leaked for the Ryzen 5000 series, and finally is the memory clock, which is obviously the frequency of main system memory. Now, according to this slide, which again was leaked, the clocks themselves are set in a 1-1-1 relationship, and the clock frequency is based upon the speed of the clock frequency of the memory, i.e. the faster the RAM that you utilize, the faster all of these clocks increase. And the example they've given here is that if you're utilizing DDR4 3600 memory, then you're looking at 1800 megahertz for FCLK, UCLK, as well as, of course, MCLK. And according to this anyway, if you're looking to squeeze the most out of your system, the biggest way to do so would be to actually crank your memory to the bleeding edge, get as much clock frequency out of your memory as possible. DDR4 3800 was suggested for the Ryzen 3000 series, so something like a 3950X, but if you are using the Ryzen 5000 series, ideally you'll want to pair it with memory which is DDR4 4000 MHz. This slide was courtesy of the website Technopat, and I will link the full articles for this in the video description, of course. Yeah, so basically, don't be running this with really slow DDR4 memory at like 2666 megahertz, as it's probably not going to go so well. And from AMD, let's skip our way over to Intel and Alder Lake S. This is courtesy of videocards.com, as they have actually been sent a photo of Alder Lake S, or more specifically underneath the package. So the package is absolutely ginormous compared to Comet Lake S, we're looking at an LGA 1200 socket versus an LGA 1700 socket. I've not counted the pins, but apparently Ycry has actually literally counted the pins, and yep, it's 1700 all right. This means that the package itself, as you can probably tell by the photo, is a little bigger than Comet Lake. It's 37.5 versus by 37.5 versus 37.5 times 45 mm. So yes, we are looking at a considerable increase in size for Alder Lake. And Alder Lake 2 is apparently going to launch in the latter half of 2021, according to videocards.com's sources. And as we know at this point, it's got hybrid technology, which is going to be utilizing Golden Cove and Gracemont core architectures. This is actually confirmed by Intel what architectures it's using, so it's going to be kind of big dot small rather than big dot little. Intel want to be different, so they're calling it big dot small. And the other thing too is that we're going to see the transition to DDR5, PCIe 5, and it's going to utilize 10nm superfin. Further to all of this, the platform itself, which again, I know I've said this like 200 times at this point, but it's going to be LGA 1700, it's apparently going to be used for 3 generations of Intel products, which is actually something I'm fully supportive of. I love the idea of actually having a platform which survives longer, much like we've seen, of course, with AMD and the AM4 platform, although technically speaking, to what we understand anyway, the 300 series boards are not getting updates for Zen 3, for example, but in general, I think that having a longer life on a platform is definitely a good thing and does encourage adoption early on, at least that's my opinion. And now switching from Intel's CPUs, let's discuss Intel Xe. There is a fascinating discovery by Tim Apisek on Twitter of an entry in the Sysoft Sandra database. And this appears to be a dual GPU, once again using the Intel Xe architecture. However, the actual design appears to be utilizing an MCM approach, which kind of means that I have some questions whether this result is being read 100%. Let's put it that way. If you look at the readings here, it's hitting 1.25 gigahertz, which you can't really take too seriously. It's an engineering sample, whatever. You know, we could be looking at 1.5 gigahertz, 1.6, 1.7, or faster for final production silicon, of course, depending on budgets like power constraints and all of that jazz. But it's reading at 1536 shaders, which means a grand total of 96 execution units. The only question is, though, that, well, this would be rather different to what you expect. And I do wonder whether A, this is a low power MCM design, which would be a very much a new discovery, and I do believe that Intel have a lot grander plans than perhaps we know about, to put it mildly. But another possibility is that this is a higher end SKU, one of the HP designs, high performance designs from Intel, and those designs would have considerably more execution units. But what's happening is Sysoft Sandra is like, I just really can't understand what's going on here, help me, and just basically throwing out incorrect information, which is possibly very correct. What we do know about those designs is that they do have at least 512 EU per tile. Per tile basically means each tile is a chiplet. Intel, again, because they're Intel, want to be a little different, so they were calling their chiplets tiles instead, which would mean very interesting different configurations, of course, for Intel. Either way, honestly, I know I've said this many times at this point, but I'm super curious to see what Intel do actually bring to the table, because more players in the industry, at least in my opinion, is always ever a good thing. But that does bring me to the final story for the day, and this one is something that, well, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't think it was gonna be a thing. Yeah, I don't even know where to begin with this one. Late last night, I was just finishing up, put up my PlayStation 5 video, did all the tags, and then a number of you actually messaged me about this, and that is that Imagination Technology are doing stuff. They are reaching new licensing deals for PCIe GPUs for desktop as well as cloud computing. There's a pretty lengthy series of press statements which are associated to this because, furthermore, Imagination 2 are really pushing ray tracing as they have a quote different approach for this. But I'm going to read a couple of specific areas of the press statement. I'll link the full thing in the video description. But Imagination Technologies announces a new licensing deal with InnoSilicon, a worldwide one-stop provider of high-speed, mixed-signal, IP and custom ASIC solutions. Using its highly innovative SoC and chiplet architectures, InnoSilicon have integrated the newly launched IMG B Series BXT. I'm just going to refer to it so I don't go insane as B Series for the rest of this video. Multi-core GPU IP and a PCIe form factor. GPU SoCs for desktop and data center. The companies are also exploring a long-term strategic partnership to bring even more powerful GPU SoCs to the market. Also, I want to give you a quote from Roger Mao. He is the Vice President of Engineering over at InnoSilicon. I'm going to read this again verbatim. It's fairly lengthy, but I think it's worth reading the whole thing. Imagination's BXT multi-GPU IP delivers the levels of performance and power efficiency we had been looking for. InnoSilicon has a solid track record in delivering first-class, high-speed and high-bandwidth computing solutions in advanced FinFET process nodes. Based on this success and strong customer demand, we are announcing our upcoming products with standalone high-performance 4K, 8K PCIe Gen 4 GPU cards set to hit the market very soon. They will power 5G cloud gaming and data center applications. With a solid foundation in GDDR6 high-speed memory, cache coherency, chiplet innovations, and high-performance multimedia processor optimization. A move into a standalone PCIe form factor GPU is natural. Thanks to BXT's multi-core scalable architecture, we are able to build a customized solution to meet the high-end data center demands with fantastic cloud and computing performance. Again, Imagination Technologies have a ton of innovation and cool technology under their belt. They've got some rather nice ray tracing technology as well. There's like white papers available, which you can download on their website. I think it's very early days to know what this is going to mean for the GPU/cloud market. I mean, yeah, it's going to be an interesting scenario because in a couple of years' time, assuming the products are good, which, as you're likely aware at this point, a product is contingent upon many things. Does it explode when it plugs in? Are the drivers good? Availability of the product, performance, all of this stuff, pricing. So assuming that Imagination and company do not screw this up and it's a decent launch, and the same thing could be said for Intel as well, it's going to be a fascinating time in the gaming space for PC. And it also means that there's a lot of options potentially for next generation consoles as we see them. I mean, I personally believe the Pro consoles are still going to, of course, keep with AMD. But yeah, maybe a new Nintendo console, the Switch Pro, is going to definitely be keeping with Nvidia for obvious reasons. But future architectures after that, who the hell knows? This is going to be really cool stuff. And obviously, innovation now is getting a little faster than what I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago. That's my opinion. Maybe not everyone will agree with it, but I think this is more reminiscent of what we saw in the... I'm probably going to make myself seem like I'm like 200 years old when I'm about to say this, but kind of like the heyday of like pioneering 3D graphics, which was like late 90s, I guess, to kind of 2003, 2005, something like that. Now, yes, architectures like Nvidia's 8000 series were obviously very, very critical with the unified shader architecture, and I do understand that that was a huge leap, as was other things like I know, hardware-based ray tracing, and I do understand that. But the reason I say that those periods, that period of time, like the late 90s to like 2003, 2004, something around there, was so monumental, is that there were so many companies trying so much stuff. There was so much spaghetti being thrown at the wall, I guess, is the best way to describe it. You just got to see what stuck really fast. And back in those days, there was like ATI, who of course AMD then purchased. You had 3DFX, uh, who were synonymous with 3D graphics back in the late 90s. Obviously, Nvidia, and all of these other companies too. There were so many competing products, and one of the big problems with all of those competing products, of course, is that we didn't have really good APIs which were able to be platform agnostic. So if you had a game which supported Glide and you owned a AMD, an ATI card, and you wanted to play it, but the game was not coded specifically to take advantage of your hardware, well, you can just go to hell because you're not going to be playing it. I mean, maybe you could get really lucky and you'd have like missing textures or something like that. And some people did create kind of like wrappers, which was a thing that really happened for like glide wrappers because of issues. But just in general, because DirectX and OpenGL, never mind something like Vulkan, weren't a thing back then, yeah, it really meant that companies like 3DFX absolutely really just kind of took hold of the market because of Glide. And yeah, it was a very interesting time in the market, and obviously that started to change pretty rapidly. So, imagination technology getting involved in the PC market, depending on how it works, obviously we have no performance numbers at the end of the day at the moment. There's a lot of hype from their marketing, and I'm going to do some more investigations on this. I might try to write to a couple of the people, see if I can get an interview or something like that. That would be pretty cool. Not promising I will be able to get an interview, but it would be quite nice if I did. Yeah, so with that said though, I'm going to get going. There's going to be a second video today up on the channel, which is going to focus on consoles. So with that said, thank you very much for watching. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.